All the roll and go, where am I to go? Meet Johnny, where am I to go? For I'm a young and a sailor lad, and where am I to go?
Hello, and welcome to Where Am I to Go podcast. Today we are in Missoula, Montana. We are at the Rocky Mountain Military Museum, Military History Museum. And we are here with Tate. Tate's going to take us through this museum. Missoula's a neat little town, kind of sits in the valley of, 5 different mountains?
A hub of 5 valleys.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful place right off of Interstate 90. This museum is pretty easy to find. GPS sent us directly here. And Tate said that he'd take a bit of time this morning to take us through. And just having walked through while he opened up this morning, I can tell you there is a lot of stuff to see. There is a lot of history here. So welcome to Where Am I to Go, Tate? Tell us a little bit about the history of your museum.
Oh, we are in the building that was the headquarters for the Civilian Conservation Corps in Montana in 1936.
And just briefly tell us a little bit about the CCCs.
Oh, okay. That was an FDR program to get kids off the streets in the Depression where they were causing trouble and out to the national forests and national parks where they'd get some good food in them and be able to do some good public work on places like Glacier National Park, Lolo National Forest. And this building was headquarters for the Montana district of the CCC, and ultimately 25,000 corpsmen were processed through the building that is now the main museum building here.
Wow, that's a lot of people. Yeah. And they did a lot of work. The CCC was a program that was established by FDR to kind of help families get out of the Depression and to get the economy moving. Isn't that correct?
Yes, very much so. Most visible thing in western Montana, you go over Logan Pass and Glacier National Park, those stone guardrails were built by the CCC.
Okay. Sounds good. And how long did the CCC program run?
1932 through 1941. After Pearl Harbor, the priority was getting young men into uniform and off to the front rather than working on the national parks and forests. So priorities changed 1941.
Okay. And this is on the site of old Fort Missoula, is that correct?
Yes. This whole, I guess roughly 5 to 6 blocks complex we're on is Fort Missoula generally, and 5 to 6 large square blocks. And Fort Missoula has been here since 1877.
Okay, and is it still owned by the military or just?
A variety of public and private agencies now, but there's still a National Guard vehicle maintenance shop in back of us here at the Military Museum.
Okay, and was it still a military base after the CCCs? Did they use it as a World War I, World War II base of some sorts or another?
Last active infantry unit was the 4th Infantry, which was the parent organization of the CCC.
Okay.
They're deployed to Alaska in 1941. Then Fort Missoula becomes the alien detention center for Italian nationals who are interned.
So in other words, it was a World War II
internment camp.
Internment camp.
Yes, and also for some Japanese nationals from the West Coast who are here
really?
for time, but primarily Italians here.
So it was a relocation camp for the Japanese also?
For Japanese nationals, yes.
I did not. This ties into some other podcasts we did. We're from Wyoming, and Hart Mountain was big there. Yeah. They had C camps all over Wyoming too, but the Hart Mountain relocation podcast that we did covers that in great detail. But we've also hit, and I wasn't even aware of this till just probably 5 years ago, that we actually had German and Italian POWs on American soil. But since that time, we've hit several POW camps. There was one in Wyoming in Douglas. There was one in Salina, Utah. There was one in Fort Stanton, New Mexico. There was one in Arizona, in Phoenix, Arizona. And those are the ones I can think of right off the top of my head. And so they were everywhere, kind of.
We weren't a POW camp. We were for civilian internees here.
Okay, now explain the difference.
This camp was not military run. It was run by the Department of Justice, and the Border Patrol provided the security. The internees were Italians who'd been working at the World's Fair or were in ports in U.S. harbors, and they were detained before Pearl Harbor. The Coast Guard and Navy simply swooped them up and brought them here to what was at that point an empty fort with the infrastructure to hold them. The Japanese nationals, that was part of the West Coast story, the post-Pearl Harbor internment. But they were, it was adult men who were brought here for a briefer period of time, about 5 months.
So they were thinking that these they were Italian nationals. They weren't
sailors and workers. Yeah.
Okay, so they were afraid that they were going to rise up, like what they were afraid that the Japanese were going to rise up.
I suspect a major part of it was the British didn't want to be fighting these fellows in North Africa. They were military reservists for the most part, and so they asked FDR to do them a favor and swoop them up here and keep them incarcerated.
I have never heard this part of the history. This is really intriguing. I'm going to have to look into this quite a bit more because I knew that they had relocated the Japanese. I didn't realize that they had an Italian roundup also and relocated ones that were already here in the U.S., even if they weren't citizens.
Correct. Yeah, we've got several preserved buildings of the fort that tell the story of this.
Wow, was this high security also, or was it kind of minimal security?
Interesting story. When they get here, the Border Patrol's out in full force. They have guard towers, barbed wire, and all that for the Italian side. After about a year, the security demand lessens, and they're allowed to go out and work in the national forests and downtown at the Florence Hotel and just on the sugar beet industry here, and all that. And several stayed in the U.S. after internment and remained here. A few remained here in Missoula. We had one fellow who went on to work for the University of Montana as an administrator for the next several decades, and we had one fellow, Alfredo Chipolato, who stayed here, raised his family, and ran a deli down on Broadway here, corner of Broadway Avenue here for the next half century after he was brought here.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I love learning new history, and some of this stuff is just so intriguing to me. Okay, so that's what this building was used for, and now it's used as a museum.
Yeah, this building during the internment period was the post engineer's office, but the heyday of its use came in the 1930s as CCC headquarters. After World War II, it became a National Guard battalion headquarters.
And it kind of looks like what you would expect a 1930s, 1940s barracks or whatever to look like. It's just a long building that's, probably 35 foot wide, 36 foot wide, and 150 foot long or something.
Yeah, I've heard it described as Cape Cod construction or Kentucky horse country style.
Okay. So. Yeah, all single level, and this is cool. So let's start taking a look at your museum and some of the displays you've got. It looks like you cover, from my little walk around here, looks like you cover stuff from Civil War, Indian Wars, World War I, II, Vietnam, kind of everything.
Well, since we're the only one of our kind for a very large region, we go all the way back to the Revolution.
Oh, do you?
So
and how big of a region are you the only one?
Oh, pretty much western Montana, northern Idaho, pretty much all the way down to the Yellowstone Park region area.
Yeah, they just opened a big military museum in Du Bois, Wyoming.
I've heard.
Oh, it's awesome.
Plan to get down when I can.
I would plan to get down there. They have some really neat things, but we haven't had an opportunity to do a podcast there, but I did go through the museum, and they say it's the largest collection of military vehicles in the nation.
Sure. Yeah. Cut the fan there.
We're good. Anyway, so you've got displays coming all the way from the Revolutionary War.
Yes, we have a very local Sons of the American Revolution chapter that helps us out with that.
Well, that's cool. Okay, so where would you like to start?
Oh, why don't I show you our two Keystone exhibits, if you can.
I like Keystones.
Certainly. This is a Pennsylvania fellow, huh? Okay. Well, this is the model of the USS Missoula, an attack transport from World War II. and the job of this ship was to transport Marines to the invasions of the Pacific Islands during World War II.
Okay.
Here's Missoula's connection with the Battle of Iwo Jima in 1945. The USS Missoula was present for the invasion in February 1945. Everyone knows the story of the Marine Corps flag raising over Iwo Jima. Okay.
And that, well, we'll just briefly hit that. That's the one where the Marines, there's like 5 or 6 Marines pushing the flag up.
It's immortalized in the Arlington, Virginia Memorial today, the large one. Okay, well, if everyone's familiar with that picture taken by the Associated Press, Joe Rosenthal, before that, there was a first flag raising with a smaller flag, and that flag came from the USS Missoula.
And it was on Iwo Jima.
Correct.
Wow.
And one of the Marines on the USS Missoula, who was part of the first flag-raising party, was PFC Louis Charlot. We have a Charlot, Montana today. Chief Charlot in the 19th century was a famous local chief of the Salish tribe. This was his great-grandson right here.
Okay.
He was part of the flag-raising party of for the first flag, and he was killed on Iwo Jima a couple of weeks later.
Really? Now, was Charlot named after his grandfather?
Yes, yes.
And Charlot's up by St. Ignatius and
Correct,
Ronan.
yeah.
Right.
It's a very
just north of here.
Long-standing Salish family on the Flathead Reservation north of here.
Right. Okay.
So.
Wow.
Okay, so
and it's cool that you guys had a ship named after you.
us and about 250 other communities across the.
Are there really that many Missoulas?
No, other communities. It was an attack transport. It was basically a Liberty ship, and they churned these out like popcorn during the war very fast. So the Navy needed about 200 some of these, and they needed 200 communities across the country to name them after.
I get what you're saying.
Certainly.
I didn't realize that's how they did that.
No, that's it. So we were talking about Pennsylvania a second ago. All the way from Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, we have our Civil War cannon right here. This is a U.S. ordnance gun, produced 1863, a few months after Gettysburg, in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, Phoenixville Iron Works. Fun fact, Phoenixville, Pennsylvania is also where they filmed the Steve McQueen science fiction movie, The Blob.
Oh, okay.
All right. Okay.
And this is an original cannon.
Yes, and this was the most advanced piece of artillery used by the Union Army during the war. This particular piece went from Phoenixville, and it was bought by the New Jersey State Militia. It went to Trenton, New Jersey, did home guard duty in New Jersey for the balance of the war, stayed in the New Jersey militia warehouses until the 1900s, and then de-accessed, and it was sent to a place called Bannerman's Warehouse in New York State.
Okay.
Bannerman's was a surplus firm that essentially took care of disposing of all the leftover stuff from the Civil War all the way up to the 1950s.
Oh, really?
Okay. Well, we have a place called Pompey's Pillar in eastern Montana. It's a Lewis and Clark site.
Right.
Okay, so it's a private site in the 1950s. It's owned by a family named Foote out of Billings, Montana. They want to build a frontier town at the base of Pompey's Pillar. They call Bannerman's Warehouse. They get this cannon shipped out to Pompey's Pillar. It's there for the next 60 years. Pompey's Pillar then gets transferred to the Bureau of Land Management. They decide they want to do straight Lewis and Clark story. They call up the Museums Association of Montana and say, we have a number of things we'd like to pass out, including a cannon. Anybody want a cannon? I'm on the board of the Museums Association of Montana. It was up for about 3 seconds before.
Yeah, we know somebody wants a cannon.
So we went to Billings, went Pompey's Pillar, picked it up, took it to a professional restorer, got it back to its 1863 appearance. Put it out on the lawn for a while, fired it 4 times, and then with the help of 25 National Guardsmen, we disassembled it and moved it here and reassembled it. This thing is heavy to move and heavy.
Oh, I'll bet.
So.
And you can't get it through the door very easy.
No, we had to take the whole thing apart. Took us about 20, 25 guys to get this.
You should have
thing
put a
assembled.
garage door in there so you could have wheeled it out and shot it another 4 times, because that would have been the big attraction to me, is letting this thing loose every once in a while.
Oh, yes, yes. Well, we've actually got a board member who has access to pieces like this, who brings them down occasionally.
Oh, well, that's cool. In this display, you've got the cannon, you've got the barrel swabs here, you've got a Union soldier mannequin standing here, all decked out in his Union attire, and then you've got a Confederate suit sitting right here next to it too.
Yes, that's right. We
So.
tried to bring a little bit of the Civil War to Montana. Montana was essentially born during the Civil War.
Right.
In 1863, President Lincoln wanted to wanted to admit more territories as free territories. So he basically found 3 guys on the streets of D.C. and declared the Montanans and said,
Okay.
you're now the territorial government of Montana. You need to send a delegate to the 1864 Republican Convention to vote for me. So they said fine, and
Really?
there you go. Yeah.
Wow. That's an interesting story that I haven't heard too.
Yeah. A little bit more involved. They had Montana connections, but it was pretty much an initiative of the Lincoln administration to get Montana admitted as a territory.
Okay. Interesting.
So,
Okay.
well, we've got a section here on Montanans in battle, and we have one of Fort Missoula's own here. Brigadier General Walter M. Johnson, a West Pointer who came out here in the 1920s. And he was stationed here at the fort with the CCC and did some of the landscaping around the fort. And he met his wife in Missoula. Funny story, her name was Virginia Weisel. Their family ran a dude ranch up Swan Valley here.
Okay.
So they had to elope because at the time their family didn't consider an Army officer, even a West Point, quite up to local standards. So they went to Superior, Montana, west of here, got married, and then he brought her back here. Unfortunately, that night he was on duty, their honeymoon night, but he was very resourceful. He said, Mrs. Johnson, we have a nice guardhouse here at the fort. I'm going to set you up there. The sergeant will get you a cot and everything you need. I'm on duty, and I'll see you in the morning. So that was how they started their wedded life. And Johnson went on to become a colonel during World War II, commanded the 117th Infantry Regiment during the Mortain campaign in France in World War II, and then went on to become a military governor of Okinawa, and came back here to retire here in Missoula.
Wow.
His daughter is now on the, is a former WAC herself, is on the board of the Military Museum here today.
Okay. And WAC is
Women's Army Corps.
Women's Army Corps, right. So, and now this is his actual uniform and,
Yes.
and his actual artifacts. There's a couple of hats in here, dress hats.
Yes.
There's a picture of him with, I'm assuming that's a paratrooper's
Yes.
outfit,
Yeah.
and a couple of other in the field pictures, and nice display.
Oh, certainly. So we've got more on the fort in the 1930s here. You see by the photographs here, it was a very bustling place during the Depression period.
And you've got a cot with several different gas masks and bags. And now I see that you have the U.S. Army dog sled. So
Yes.
did they have a dog corps also?
Yes, for use in Alaska, cold weather regions during World War II. Up on the Continental Divide here, we had a place called Camp Rimini, which was during World War II.
And that would have been just outside of Butte?
Helena.
Outside of Helena,
Generally,
okay.
But up on the Divide, and their full-time job was training Army sled dogs and Army sled dog handlers.
Really?
Yeah, Camp Rimini.
That's cool. I never really, I mean, the military has little bits of everything from their horse corps to all of that, but I guess I've never really thought much about the dog corps.
Oh yeah, a lot of activity in Alaska and Canada, Alaska Highway and the Aleutians campaign, so there was a big demand for cold weather specialists during World War II in the U.S. military.
Well, and a lot of Europe's snowy and stuff too, isn't it?
Yes.
Did they use the dogs over there also, or?
Not that I've heard of, but the story there is the 10th Mountain Division, which we have a case on back there, was specially trained for mountain warfare beginning in 1943. They get to Italy. 1942, they get to Italy in late 44, early 45, and they are very active during the last stage of the Italian campaign, which got into mountainous territory. And it was a full division of men. They recruited especially amongst skiers, cold weather people, and specialists and all that. And the local connection here is a lot of these fellows came back to the States after the war and essentially started the ski industry in the western U.S.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
Well, we've got a naval display right here, a number of PT boat models. Pretty much most people, maybe not as many younger ones as should be, are familiar with the story of President John F. Kennedy and PT 109.
Right.
President Kennedy commanded a small PT boat, which was a small patrol boat, basically during World War II. And President Kennedy's boat, PT 109, was cut in two by a Japanese destroyer in action off the Solomon Islands, and he became famous for saving the majority of his crew and getting them to safety afterwards. Well, PT 109, prior to Kennedy taking it over, was commanded by a Missoula man.
Oh, really?
Jack Kempner. And he had the boat, and then he transferred it to Kennedy and went on to other jobs. But for the rest of his life, Mr. Kempner joked that he'd taken better care of government property than President Kennedy had.
And probably rightfully so. That's interesting. And that display has several little model boats and a couple of PT boats and pictures, and again, a sailor in an outfit and a communications box. That's kind of interesting. It's got kind of a close line effect for the antenna.
Yeah, portable communications array for circuit.
Kind of folded out like an umbrella.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's right. So we've got our armaments room right here. We have representative pieces from the colonial era forward. You kind of get a condensed version of what you'll see at Springfield Armory in Springfield, Massachusetts here, the development of the American military weaponry from muzzle-loading rifles and muskets all the way to the present day.
And we start off at flintlocks, end up in percussion, then we end up in bolt action, and then come into semi-automatics. And when were they first starting to use the semi-automatics? 1942, 45? Because they had a lot of bolt action in World War I, but I'm not sure if they were bringing in the automatic weapons then or not.
I've got my chart from Springfield Armory somewhere. I think you could use clips in World War I for the first time. Spanish-American War, from what I recall, is the last single shot.
And then you've also got all of you've got Japanese weapons here.
Yes.
Again, you've got a percussion Japanese rifle that has a really interesting hammer on it.
A replica, yeah.
Oh, that's a replica. Okay. And then you've got some German firearms.
Yes.
And then you have a nice sword collection in here also.
Oh, yes, edged weapons as well.
And bayonets.
The Mauser on the platform over there, that was recovered by a Montana GI.
And brought back home?
From Stuttgart. These had essentially been thrown out the back of the truck in the last days of 1945 in the hope that German civilians would pick them up and use them against U.S. forces.
Okay. That's an interesting fact also. I wonder how many weapons were sent home that probably weren't supposed to be, but...
Judging by my experience at gun shows over the years, you could get away with a lot in 1945, not so much today.
That's kind of what I've heard. So
we've got a helicopter here.
Oh yeah,
a Huey UH-1H that was used in Vietnam. This one was in Vietnam, 1967 through 70, and brought back through TACCOM and it's here through U.S. Army Tank and Automotive Command.
Okay.
And it's was taken to Fort Rucker, Alabama, training helicopter for about 30 years, and then before it's made its way out here. This shows how everybody finds you on the internet these days. The pilot who had this in Vietnam for a period of time, Ricky Gironis, found us on the internet that we had a ship, and he came out here a few years back, visited, and was pleased with what we did, so he left us his Vietnam gear.
And it's got his flight jacket, his flight helmet with the microphone in front, replica or model, I guess, of his craft and his flight suit. This is really nice too. So this machine actually saw combat. And what was it? It was a medical transport or a troop transport or gunship or
transport and ground support.
Okay.
as well. Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty cool that he was able to find his ship and you know, I mean, it seems like there were so many of them. A lot of them didn't come back too. But
the internet will take you anywhere these days.
I guess that's true.
So.
Okay.
So again, I mentioned we delve into the Revolution just a little bit. We've got a couple of uniform donations. This is a reenactor's uniform from the 2nd Connecticut from Mr. Lockhart, who's unfortunately is deceased this year. And local man, Warren Dite Little, put this Continental together as a memorial to his antecedents who were in the New Jersey militia.
Okay.
During the war. Fun fact, westernmost battle of the Revolutionary War is fought in St. Louis, Missouri.
What?
May 26, 1780. British frontier scouts basically put together a force of Lakota Indians and use them to attack the Spanish settlement, combined Spanish-French settlement at St. Louis, Missouri.
Really?
Okay.
That's way further west than I would have ever even imagined.
Because by that point, France and Spain are fighting on the American side. Spain is the colonial authority in the time, but there's a lot of French settlers in St. Louis. So the Franco-Spanish build a very large blockhouse. You see here.
There's a picture here.
Basically, it looks like a medieval castle tower. And the British Indian force hurls himself against this for a day, and then gives up on the attack and heads back north. But they also attacked east of the Mississippi into what is now western Illinois today. But at that point, George Rogers Clark and Virginia militia show up, and they tangle with the British slightly on the east side of the Mississippi. American troops, and that ends that particular British initiative, and they retreat north, and that's the end of the Battle of St. Louis, pretty much.
I had no idea that the revolution. I thought that was just an East Coast deal, pretty much.
No. George Rogers Clark is very active with Virginia militia in seizing parts of Illinois and Indiana during the war. And the British are in Detroit, so the idea is to interpose yourself between Detroit and where the big area of American settlement at the time is in Kentucky.
Okay. So. The thing that amazes me, and I've thought about it a lot, is movements. I mean, you have troops on the East Coast, but you're 1,000 miles or better inland by the time you hit St. Louis.
Certainly.
And trying to supply that distance. And it had to have taken, 12, 14 days, maybe even 2-3 weeks to be able to get from point A to point B and to be able to supply?
Well, it's light infantry. They're living off the land for the most part. They aren't toting supply wagons around with them.
But still, they're having to walk that far.
Yes,
I'm not ready to go take a 1,000-mile walk.
Oh, yes.
Especially in wintertime, and you look at like the early or the wars that happened around here, Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, the Indian Wars and different things that happened. Some of those guys were like the Fetterman Battle was the day before Christmas, and one of the guys, Portuguese Phillips, he went from that battlefield to Cheyenne on foot in 2 days, and you're going, how in the world does a man accomplish something like that? But they did it all the time back in those times.
Notice when you look at pictures of people who lived on the frontier in the 18th and 19th century, they're in really good shape.
They don't have that belly like we have?
No, no time for that.
Okay.
So here's another indication of you never know what's going to come through the door. This trunk came into us one day from a garage in Columbia Falls, Montana. I saw the stenciling on it, and a bell went off in my head. This is somebody who's somewhat notable. So I looked it up. This is the trunk of Major General Merritt Red Edson, U.S. Marine Corps.
Okay.
Red Edson was serving in China in the 1930s as a junior officer. He used this trunk to bring his stuff back from China. He went on to command a Marine Raider battalion on Guadalcanal.
Oh, really?
And he was awarded the Medal of Honor for action on Guadalcanal. And he retired as Major General, U.S. Marines, and was very prominent throughout the Marine Corps history in the 30s, 40s, and into the 50s.
And you've got a lot of patches in this display. And
yes. Veterans come in and they say, my patch isn't on the wall there, and I say, send it, we're happy to put it up. So this is what
that's cool.
Several years of having people send stuff in. This is what we've got.
Then you've got a barracks bunk here.
Junk on the bunk, we call it.
That would be a good name for it.
A composite of U.S. Army equipment from the 1940s all the way up to the present day here.
And we've got canteens, we've got helmets, we've got field hats, we've got leggings. And are those rations? Or yeah, those are some of the canned rations. Mm-hmm. Sea rations, are those sea rations in the box?
Correct.
Okay, I'm doing all right then.
Yes.
Several different bags.
Yeah.
A water bag. Set of boots, and then you've got a helmet up here that doesn't look like it's in super good shape. I don't think I'd have wanted my head in that one.
No, this was one of our earliest acquisitions. General Beau Foster, our founding president, saw to this. This was a helmet recovered from the Monte Cassino battlefield in Italy, January-May 1944. That was a very prominent monastery blocking the road to Rome on a big hill, and it took the Allies about 5 months to clear it out of the way and get on the road to Rome.
Wow!
So.
And it's got holes all through.
Yes,
yes. I don't think the head did real well.
No, unless it was had been discarded and was just
right.
hit otherwise. So.
Okay.
Don't know.
And this kind of brings us back on around our Civil War cannon.
Sure, yes.
And some of our Civil War attire. You've got several Civil War hats in this display.
Yes.
And, okay, I'm seeing this game right here. Was that a Civil War game?
Yes.
The game that I'm referring to is the one that everybody's seen at their grandpa's house or on the table at the restaurant, that has the holes with the pegs on top, and you got to jump the pegs in order to end up with the one left.
Yeah, there's a variant with marbles too, Chinese checkers, I think it's called.
Yeah, and this one has horseshoe nails as its
more primitive,
as its play pieces.
More primitive version. Yeah.
Huh. That's kind of cool. I didn't realize that game was that old. I knew my grandma had it, but
sure. Oh yeah. There's a lot of hours in camp. You had to do something.
Okay. Which way do we go now?
Okay.
Now this is divided out into several different rooms, and so we've got lots of different displays to go look at, and then
we cover both World War I and World War II under a single title here: the World Conflict, 1914 through 1945.
Okay.
And we just inaugurated a new feature this week. This was formerly at the Montana Historical Society. It's a rack of cards. You pick a card, it has some biographical information on a Montanan who served in World War I. You can take it with you, look through the exhibit, find where they are in the exhibit. We try to provide a little context there and find out what event they were involved in, and then we've got a book where you can then flip it open and see what their eventual fate in World War I was. So this is a new feature. We'll just bringing online this week.
That's kind of a nice interactive deal.
We make our visitors work a little bit, yes.
Well, that's good. You seem to learn a lot more when you're having to put a little bit of effort into
Yes.
it instead of just walking through and looking.
Certainly.
That is cool. And so, are these a lot of these didn't make it back home? I take it. If you, when you say that you find out what their fate was in the end.
Some didn't. It's a mixture of Montana civilians and Montana soldiers in World War I. We cover both the home front and the overseas here in this exhibit.
Okay.
So, and we start out our exhibit with a story of a local man, Clarence Street. Street went to high school here in circa 1910. His family moved here. He went to Missoula County High School at the time. He enlisted for the war, 1917, and he goes to Europe, and he's a railway soldier with the American Expeditionary Force, helping run the supply railways to the Western Front.
Okay, now they built railroads to supply?
Well, some. Mainly they used the existing French system, but they had to overburden the French system with supply trains, so the Americans provided railway soldiers to help out with that.
Really?
Yes.
I did not know that was part of the infrastructure. That I mean, I've seen the portable bridges and some of that type of stuff, but I had no idea that they were also maintaining and building railways.
Oh, it was an immense undertaking.
Wow.
This was the biggest U.S. logistical effort ever to date. So.
Wow, that's cool.
So anyway, Clarence, bright fellow, he gets picked up by General Pershing's staff. He works as an intelligence analyst for General Pershing. And then he gets picked up as a junior aide at the Versailles Peace Conference. So
really?
He's there for all that. He comes home, goes to work for the New York Times as a journalist. He covers the League of Nations in Geneva and interwar events in the 1920s and 30s. And then World War II breaks out, and he is in Washington, and he starts the Atlantic Council, which is a lobbying group encouraging greater cooperation between the U.S. and international organizations, and the ideas that they put out kind of find fuller form in NATO and the United Nations.
I was just going to ask if it kind of...
So he does that for the rest of his life, and eventually the Atlantic Council becomes the Atlantic Union Committee. And then that becomes the Strike Council, and there's a Strike think tank, small think tank named after Strike today in Washington, D.C. But he was coming back to Missoula as late as the 1980s, and his life kind of offers an interesting thread of 20th century events and how they impacted one local man here in Missoula.
Huh. Wow. I had no idea Missoula had this much history. I used to work. I used to stay in St. Ignatius. I worked on a project there. Then I worked on a project here in Missoula. So I was down here all the time, but I had no idea some of this history.
Yeah, the university brings in a lot of people.
Oh yeah,
to punch above our weight. So, well, in the exhibit here, we cover the 1914 to 45 story. Along the wall here, principal events and
it goes all the way down this 40-foot wall.
Wraps around.
And even goes on around.
We've got for World War I cases cases on the principal combatants, Germany, France.
And you've got artifacts from the German ammo carriers up for the belt, the helmet, a couple of the plane models, some of the medals. And this timeline that you've got, he's got articles out of different magazines, different not costuming, but different uniforms, maps. All of it's laminated, easy to read, and it starts at 1914, 15, 16, and each one of these posters or areas is probably 8 foot by 4 foot. That's full of different pictures and diagrams. And then this was your French display.
French case.
In the French case, he's got ammo belt. What in the world is that?
That's the helmet used by French
the
forces.
Helmet, but this wrap thing, it says Pansements.
Oh, it's a medical.
I was going to say something medical. I'm not very good at reading French, so I'm not very good with English.
You're not alone. British case right here. We've got a replica of a trench at Gallipoli right there.
Okay.
And,
And we've got a hand grenade, a cup, a set of horse stirrups, and again a helmet, a pick shovel, just a lot of things there. And then the next one has
American Expeditionary
this
Force.
is the U.S. Okay.
Yes.
And in there we've got, are those brass knuckles? That is really interesting piece. We've got a handle that looks like a pull handle like for a barn door, and then it's got notches in the front that wrap around your knuckles to where it's not like your normal little set of brass knuckles. The knuckle pieces are 2 inches wide and would cover your whole fist.
Last ditch trench weapon.
Wow. And again, there's some knives and mess kit, canteen, helmet, flare gun, little Bible, I'm assuming. Yep.
And we've got
a little pocket Bible.
Decorated helmet right here from the Illinois National Guard Division.
Okay.
86th Division, the Black Hawk Division.
And this was World War I?
Yes.
Were they allowed to decorate their helmets and some of that?
If you see a helmet decorated like that, that one made it to Europe and back.
Okay.
Certain. Yeah.
Wow.
So, and more of our World War I collection right here, and you see various breakouts on the home front. Here's where we have our small cards, which tell the stories of Montanans in the war, home front.
And now all these uniforms are different countries, correct?
No, these are all American Expeditionary Force.
Okay,
right
even
here.
like the helmet here that looks like a French helmet?
That is a German.
Oh, that's a German.
German Pickelhaube early war helmet. Right there, replaced by the Stahlhelm right there, which is the coal scuttle helmet, which we're more familiar with from World War II. That makes its appearance a little later on in the war.
Okay. And now he's got a board down here that says influenza spread by droplets sprayed from nose and throat. Now, is this the 1918 flu because it's in the 1918 area? And so that's the one that caused so much death.
Fort Missoula, because there was a training base here during the war, was the epicenter of the flu epidemic in western Montana. Yeah.
And that was something that, from my understanding, and I don't know what all you know on it, hopefully you can give me some information, but from what I understand, the 1918 flu was brought back from Europe somehow or another and first really telegraphed itself here in the United States amongst the military forces.
Not sure of the story of the transmission back from Europe. We know the epicenter for the country was, I believe, either Fort Riley or Fort Leavenworth in Kansas. It spread outward from there.
I was thinking Ohio, but
definitely, the fact you had so many men being moved around in close quarters, that was really a generator for the influenza. Yeah.
Right. And that was the major one. That one was really, really bad.
Yes. And, that was what goes around comes around. So we pick up with the opening of World War II right here, 1939, invasion of Poland, Blitzkrieg in the West, Battle of Britain. This case are some of the better items brought back by Western Montana GIs, German items they recovered overseas. And we try to, since we're at the point where what every generation, this happens with every generation, what are familiar headlines to one generation, Guadalcanal, Iwo Jima, are history book footnotes to the current. So we try to remedy that by giving a sampling of the immensity of the events that went on, giving just a taste of everything that goes on during World War II, so that younger people especially can pick up some context on it and come away with an understanding. So we have 1941 invasion of the USSR, Pearl Harbor, Midway, and Coral Sea naval battles, 1942, Stalingrad. We try to give a taste of all these individual events with an artifact or a model or something like that. And then we cover the rest of the war, continues over here. We get into 1943, invasion of Italy. We have our home front case right here. I was talking about internment earlier. We have a wooden bocce ball used by the Italian internees here. at
Okay,
Fort
now I thought
Missoula.
that was a cannonball.
No,
'Cause it's about
no.
the same size.
If you're
and
hard
stuff.
up, it might be a cannonball.
But it's made out of wood.
Wooden bocce ball. And then the artwork here was done by Japanese internees.
Okay.
Well, they were Japanese national internees. And we've got more home front items here. Some of our better recovered items from the Pacific Theater here. I've seen only really one good collection of Japanese recovered items from the Pacific War. The stuff from there was tougher to get back, and a lot of it just fell apart due to climate. But we've got a Japanese helmet, prayer flags, Japanese bayonets, and so forth.
Wow.
Bugle. And get into the end of the war, 1945, the final campaigns covered here. We've got a sampling of World War II weaponry. In this case here,
Now you got bolt action
yeah,
rifles in here for World War II. So these are Japanese though.
one the back one is German, the front one is Japanese.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I've seen several of these Japanese pieces that look just like that.
Sure.
So that's way cool. You got them with the bayonets, and you got the 9/11 over here, and the U.S. carbine. And what's this? This is a hand grenade. Is that correct? It's
Just some shell shrapnel that fell apart. That was brought back to us by one of our early trustees, John Moe, who was an internment guard here at the camp and was also in the Navy in the Pacific Theater. He brought that in one day. I'm not sure of the provenance of which.
It looks like one of those hand-thrown grenades or whatever with a handle on it or something, but it's
That could
broke
be.
open with some stuff inside.
Yeah, that could be.
Interesting.
Certainly. And we've got our exhibit on American women in World War II here, covering home front factory workers, women home front pilots during the war, women Marines, WACS waves, Coast Guard women.
Now, what are the
Army nurses.
waves? I've heard of the wax.
The equivalent in the Navy.
Okay, okay.
Women accepted for voluntary emergency service in the Navy. 100,000 women joined the Navy during World War II.
Wow. And then they were put to work in the factories and everything back home too.
Yes.
Women were really involved in the war effort at that
That's
point
right.
in time.
We've got the iconic Rosie the Riveter poster right there. That's comes out of that period.
Right.
Yeah, lots of women went to work.
That is really cool. Okay. And then we come back into this back room. And I'm immediately staring as I walk through the door down the barrel of a cannon.
Well, this is a model of one assembled by one of our former trustees, now deceased, Kermit Edmonds. He was a high school teacher and also a park ranger in the summers at a number of Western military sites, Fort Laramie, Big Hole, and places like that. And he, in his spare time, he crafted this model of a 6-pounder that would have been used on the American frontier, and he assembled it in his high school classroom and kept it in there at Hellgate High School here locally for
Really?
many years, bequeathed it to us.
Now you say it's a model, but it looks like it could fire.
This one I haven't attempted, nor am I likely to.
I'll accept that answer.
All right. So in this room, we try to cover the American military experience in the frontier from the 1790s up through the 1890s as best you can in a relatively small room. We start
Right.
out with the Ohio Valley Indian Wars in the 1790s, and then get to when the U.S. Army gets to Montana and the personages of the Lewis and Clark expedition, 1804 through 1806, and they pass through the Missoula Valley here.
And they were pretty well accepted by the natives at the time.
it was.
Lewis and Clark didn't have that big of a. I mean, there were some situations where they were running, from what I understand, but for the most part, they got along pretty well with everybody.
For the most part, it's a diplomatic
Right.
expedition. The two clashes come when they're heading up the Missouri in 1804, and they have a confrontation with the Teton Sioux on the Missouri, which comes to a stare down but doesn't erupt into violence. Then Lewis is trying to discover, on the way back, Lewis and a couple of men are trying to discover just where the U.S.-Canadian border is, and they go up on the Blackfeet, what is now the Blackfeet Reservation, east of Glacier National Park, and they have a confrontation with some young Blackfeet who are trying to steal their horses. There's fatalities, and they have to head out of Blackfoot country and down the Missouri River very quickly.
Right.
To,
but the fatalities weren't on the Lewis and Clark side. I think they only lost 2 guys on that whole 2-year expedition, which
only
is just
one,
phenomenal.
and that was to, I believe, appendicitis or an intestinal disorder. Sergeant Floyd,
Right.
he's buried on a bluff in Iowa today overlooking the Missouri.
Okay. And now they came through Missoula because they went over Lolo Pass, correct?
Yes. On the outbound route, they come up the Bitterroot Valley and they stop at Lolo, Travelers Rest, which is now Travelers Rest State Park, which preserves their campsite. And they didn't get to Missoula on that leg. They headed over the Bitterroot, headed over Lolo Pass into Idaho. On the return route, they come back and they divide at Travelers Rest when they get back over the mountains from Idaho. Clark goes south, retraces their steps, and his job is to explore the Yellowstone River Valley. That's where
Right.
Clark goes, and that's when he gets to Pompey's Pillar. Lewis takes his people, and they head north and over present-day US 200 into the Great Falls area.
Right.
And they go back down. He makes his excursion up the Marias River to find out where the U.S.-Canadian border is, has his scuffle with the Blackfeet, and then he heads back down the Missouri, and they join where the Yellowstone and the Missouri meet. And then they go back the rest of the way together down the Missouri.
Now, does that amaze you that they were able to meet at a certain point when they've taken 2 completely different routes, no telephone, no walkie-talkies, no way to figure this out, and 3 months later or 6 months, I don't know how long it took them to do all the walking around that they did, and then they meet up again at a certain point.
Yeah, well,
It just boggles my mind.
It's a fairly well-defined point, but again, it requires an awful lot of reliance.
Well, yeah, and if you're there 2 weeks early, are you going, did they already leave, or do we wait another 2 weeks?
Yes,
It's just that whole concept just is beyond my comprehension.
Indeed.
But not only that, I've driven over Lolo Pass 2 or 3 times, and in a car, that pass takes forever. It's a 4 or 5 hour drive over Lolo Pass.
Yes.
And I know that Lewis and Clark almost died on that section of the journey.
They got caught by the snows early when they went westward.
And just thinking about trying to take that whole pass in the middle of winter. In fact, I think they were told by the Indians or the natives that that wasn't a wise idea, and they did it anyway.
Yes. Press on.
And the thing that had to have been a real big surprise is 2 years later when they got back to Washington and showed up and gave their presentation to Jefferson, because he had no idea once they were gone for 2 years.
Yeah.
Just the waiting game seems so interesting to me.
Yes, indeed. You had to be patient. So we cover the westward experience here, events east of the Mississippi, pretty much the Seminole War, the Alamo Mexican War, Trail of Tears, and then we pick up the story in Montana again. The U.S. Army gets to Montana in force in 1866 and 1870 after the Civil War, and there's the Bozeman Trail conflict near present-day Billings, and other events going on. And Fort Missoula arrives as a result of a confluence of needs and events in 1877. That's when Fort Missoula is established, 1877. So more on the national story here. We've got a fairly good collection of artifacts from Fort Sanders, Wyoming, of period artifacts from the
Fort Sanders, Wyoming.
Yeah,
where was that?
Here's a
Being from Wyoming, I thought I knew my Wyoming history pretty well.
active only a few years. It's basically on the Oregon Trail route, if you can look at this 19th century map here.
Right.
But It was
So it's kind of over more by Jackson someplace.
there you see Nebraska on the
Right.
19th
Oh, okay.
century
I'm not. I
map
didn't.
here.
Right. Okay. So more over by where Fort Laramie was.
Yeah.
Okay.
generally.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, they had several forts on that route.
sure.
And then you've got some cannonballs that look a lot like that wooden ball we just looked at.
These were brought back from the Panama Canal Zone by Colonel Joe Golden.
Okay.
Golden was an officer here in the 1930s. Was stationed in the Panama Canal Zone. These are Spanish cannonballs he picked up back there. He came back to Missoula to retire, and these found their way. And he was gone before I started the job, but these found their way into our collection right here.
Okay.
Yeah, and here's a picture of Chief Charlo right here. Louis,
Okay.
PFC Louis Charlo's great-great-grandfather.
Right.
So, and again, covering the military experience in Montana, 1876-77 is the peak of U.S. Army activity during the frontier period in Montana, back to back. We have the Little Bighorn Campaign and the Nez Perce War of 1876-77. We work very closely with the Nez Perce National Historic Trail,
Okay.
which covers the flight of the Nez Perce in 1877, and they have a very good auto tour you can take, mapped out with full color guides and everything. You can take from the Wallowa Valley in Oregon up to the Bear's Paw battlefield in north central Montana.
Okay.
Fort Missoula, by accident, they are putting Fort Missoula together, entirely unintended. When the Nez Perce War breaks out, Fort Missoula troops fight are present at the Fort Fizzle encounter in summer of 1877. Then they go on to fight in the area's largest battle of the Indian Wars, the Battle of the Big Hole, 125 miles south of here, in August 1877.
Okay. And so was that down by Darby?
Southwest of Darby.
Southwest of Darby.
You have to go over the pass
Okay.
into the Wisdom area.
Okay. And you've got several uniforms from that time period?
Replicas. These are Ordnance Department uniforms, again, provided to
Okay.
us by Kermit Edmonds.
And a picture of General Custer.
Yeah, you can't talk about military history in Montana
Without,
Custer.
oh yeah, no, can't do that one.
No.
And then
We've got a number of photographs. Interestingly, Fort Keogh, Montana, east of here, near Miles City, in Miles City. They actually had a post photographer for a time. They had two of them who were just given some space on fort to open up a photography studio.
oh wow.
One of them was Christian Barthelmess, who took these pictures down here. Another was L.A. Huffman. And these are color retinted pictures from the 1900s. And the interesting thing about L.A. Huffman is he got to Montana just in time to photograph some of the Native American participants in the Little Bighorn battle.
Oh,
So
really?
You see them right here.
Okay. That is cool. And you've got a big camera set up that would have been like you'd see
Yes.
back at that period of time.
Yes.
I was just looking up photography not long ago, and I think the first photographic picture was taken in 1825.
Yes.
And so it hadn't developed a whole lot in the 30 or 40 years before the Civil War broke out, but they were able to record a lot of the Civil War through photographs.
Oh, very much so. This is a studio camera right here.
right.
This was the iPhone camera of the 1890s right here.
It doesn't fit in your back pocket, does it?
No, you need a complete buckboard wagon for this. So.
Those are some cool pictures. I like the way that they recolor. I don't really understand how they get the colors exact. But,
these were taken in the 1890s, and then by about World War I, he'd hit upon some color retinting technique to
that's cool.
put those together.
That is really neat.
Most of what we acquire here are through veterans and their families.
Okay.
Right here, and in the early 2000s, I was getting lots and lots of material from World War II veterans or their widows who were cleaning out the house, going into the senior home, and asked if I can come pick up the box of this, box of that. And not so much of that anymore, but now we're heading to the point where Middle Eastern veterans are starting to look at.
I was going to say there aren't a
bringing
lot of the
things.
World War II veterans left. Is there any World War I left?
That's been a constant ever since the 1990s. Yeah.
Yeah, the World War I's have pretty much all.
Last World War I veteran died about 2 years before the centennial. Frank Buckles of West Virginia. Yeah.
Okay.
But again, we're starting to get a trickle of things in from the Middle East. We have a number of Desert Storm items here, and also some items brought back from Iraq and Afghanistan. Right there, we've got a high altitude, low opening jumper trainee from the 1990s.
Okay.
Right here in this mannequin display.
And you've got a mannequin with. How do you even move with that much? Compartments and everything else all wrapped around you. He's got his harness on with ammo containers and supply containers in the front.
If you're parachuting, gravity helps.
Well, I guess it does. You don't have to worry about carrying it for about 30 seconds.
Yes, that's correct. Correct. Right.
And then you've got, again, some helmets and knives.
These are items from Fort Missoula in the 50s and 60s.
I was going to say, these are older than your Middle Eastern wars.
Yes, this is from Vietnam period, actually.
Okay.
And we've got more Fort Missoula 20th century items here. We've got a silver cup given to a West Point officer who was here in the 1920s, some period china, and more on the Civilian Conservation Corps and the heyday of Fort Missoula.
You got an old tractor model in here and a pickaxe.
Pulaski is what it's called. It's a combination shovel and pickaxe.
Okay.
It was this particular design was put together by a forest ranger named Ed Pulaski, who was famous for surviving the big forest fire of 1910 here.
Oh, okay. And several different little ads and articles and some of that kind of stuff in here.
Yes, from the Green Guidon. The Green Guidon was the newsletter that was published by the Civilian Conservation Corps in this building, the newspaper of the Fort Missoula District. And today our military museum newsletter is also called the Green Guidon.
Okay. So. And then you've got a model case with the different airplanes, different amphibious vehicles, tanks, just kind of everything. Again, looks like it covers kind of the whole spectrum of air and tank battle.
We get models. I recently took in a nice collection of Great Falls of about 300 some.
Oh, geez, you're going to have to build a few more cases.
Indeed, never ends.
At what point in time do you got to build a new facility? Because this one is packed.
Oh, well, we're working on that too.
Okay.
So Asian wars covered in here. Korea, 1950 through the end of Vietnam, 1975. So we've got a Korean war items in here. It's the first use of U.S. jet aircraft. So we've got some jet models in here, and also some equipment used at the by the U.S. forces in Korea. You've got a little piece of wire from the Korean DMZ right there.
Pair of Mickey Mouse boots.
Yes.
Those are supposedly the warmest boots you can buy.
Hard to believe. That's basically they're just rubber. You got
actually the white ones. I think are the ones that everybody kind of wants. With they were the Air Force ones with the little air knobs on the side.
We've got an M7 self-propelled howitzer displayed out in front of the museum. Here's a picture of how it was used in Korea.
Okay.
Right here. And again, more on the Korean War and birth of the U.S. Air Force, late 1940s, and Korea, the first war fought by the Air Force as an independent service. That's covered here. And we wrap around into the opening of U.S. involvement in Vietnam, 1950s, 1960s.
And again, you've got a lot of uniforms, you've got a lot of communications equipment. What is that a parachute?
That is another Halo jumper there, high altitude, low opening, and that is a special operations group soldier as he would have appeared ready to jump in the about 1970, 71. We have local man who was very interested in the history of Special Operations Group in Vietnam, and these were soldiers who jumped far behind enemy lines in Laos and North Vietnam to report back, and this is what one of them would have looked like.
And at what altitude did they release their chute? Do you know?
Oh, that's...
Don't worry about it. You don't need to try and read.
If Mr. Charters was here, he could tell you in a second.
But they were jumping out at a high altitude, being 6,000 feet
straight,
or 7,000
straight
feet.
down, and then low openings, so you're not visible. So it's basically infiltration parachuting.
And this parachute that he's got on the front of him has the altimeter, so that he knows exactly where he's at when he's deploying. And I guess he didn't need a backup chute, because when you deploy your chute that low, you don't have time to worry about it.
I'm not sure. We may just not have been able to fit the backup in there in this particular mannequin. But
well, I don't know. I'm just guesstimating.
Unfortunately, Mr. Charters isn't here today. He can give you a full encyclopedia on the SOG Halo guys.
And then you've got some communication. That must have been a communication outfit out of a helicopter.
Yeah, 1950s, 60s.
And you've got some torpedoes or missiles and helmets. Again, some more artillery. Mm-hmm. Very nice. I like all the items that you have in here. You could spend days just looking at each individual item.
That is the idea. And we've got Western Montana during Vietnam covered here. This is always a matter of interest. We've got a number of pictures of relatively young people in the 50s and 60s, and now Grandpa and Grandma can come in and see themselves as they were back then.
Well, there again, the guys that served in the Korean War, they're getting, well, even the Vietnam War, you're pushing 75, 80 years old now.
Sure, yeah, that's a constant.
So.
And we've got a recent donation. We've got a Montagnard rifle from the Vietnamese Central Highlands that was brought back, donated to us from the Hill tribes in South Vietnam, who aided the special forces in trying to interdict the Ho Chi Minh Trail.
I don't think I'd want to pull the trigger on that thing.
No, I have no intent.
This is displayed in a really nice case with some of the local tapestry in the background. But it's got a pistol grip on it. Almost looks like a pistol attached to a pipe is kind of the way I describe it, but total length on it is probably 3.5, 4 foot long.
When the Special Forces first encountered the Montagnards in South Vietnam, this is what they were using, and Special Forces got them better equipped to take on the Viet Cong, North Vietnamese in their area.
And what was the firing mechanism on this?
I have no idea.
It's really bizarre when you look at how it's all set up.
Yeah.
Wow. And then in this case, you've got some field packs and helmets again, grenade carriers, just a whole bunch of different items. Yeah. And then you've got some life boot.
We've got a friend of ours who's a lieutenant commander, Naval Reserve, who's stationed in D.C., who combs the waterfront for us, looking for maritime artifacts, and he has sent us these right here. We've got a life ring from a World War II Liberty ship, which was pressed into service for use in Vietnam. This is from a National Oceanic Atmospheric acronym. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration.
Okay.
NOAA.
NOAA, okay.
Apologies to anybody from NOAA listening. I'm missing something in there. Our friend was on a ship that went to study the oil spill in the Persian Gulf in 1991 after the war, Saddam Hussein's last-ditch oil spill. The ship was named the Mount Mitchell, and this was a life ring from the ship right here.
Now, did he find this other one on the beach? You said it was a beachcomber?
No, he goes to used maritime shops.
Okay.
And he also got us 2 bells from supply ships used during the Persian Gulf War, U.S. Navy supply ships from the UNS, the Arabian Sea, and the Sea Lift Atlantic. So that's why these fellows are so far inland right here.
And they're both brass.
Yes.
They probably sound really good.
Oh, well, we've got, when we need an active bell, we've got one of the bells from the last Milwaukee Road engines to pass through Missoula. That's on display in the front gallery there.
Wow.
happy to ring it for you if you need a sound effect.
Oh, I might need it. Actually,
And
it'd probably be cool.
covering the end of the Vietnam U.S. War, U.S. withdrawal in 1975, and air and naval artifacts from local veterans who brought them in.
That's cool.
So. And we've got our media mentions on this wall. We made the Wall Street Journal one time.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty cool.
And one more gallery in this building. Apologies to your listeners, like Mark Twain said, who visited Fort Missoula in 1897.
Oh, did he?
It's a terrible fate to be talked to death.
I think I'm learning a lot from this. There's so much information I was not aware of. Right.
Well, this room, we cover the Imperial era, which is everything between the Indian War, end of the Indian Wars, and the beginning of World War I. So Spanish-American War period. And Fort Missoula is very active with its own unique stories during that time as well.
Now, was Missoula part of Spain at one point in time? I know that Wyoming had several different occupations. I mean, we had the Spanish, we had the French, we had Mexican, and the United States. I mean, there was several different I don't want to say occupiers, but under several different jurisdictions.
Okay.
I don't know if it came this far north or not.
No Spanish ever in here. Most of Montana comes with the Louisiana Purchase, which is owned by Spain for a time. Then Spain makes a vague claim to the Pacific Northwest, which includes the Missoula area, back in the 18th century, and a firmer claim is put together by Britain when they gets a Royal Navy ship up to Puget Sound and lay claim to what will become British Columbia back in the 18th century. But there's no Euro-American presence that we know of until Lewis and Clark get here in the 1804, 1806. So Fort Missoula is fully active in the 1890s, and what we have in 1888 is a African-American unit, which is sent to garrison Fort Missoula, the 25th Infantry.
And were they referred to as the Buffalo soldiers at that point in time?
And we just had a major event commemorating the Buffalo Soldiers this last spring here.
Really?
So they are here. Some items. We have a Buffalo Soldiers mint condition helmet from the 25th Infantry right here. And they gained quite a good deal of acceptance with the local community. They've got a baseball team, they've got a band, and so when they leave for the Spanish-American War in 1897, there's a huge parade downtown. 1898, there's a huge parade downtown to send them off. So quite an interesting story there. But most interesting is the fact that in 1897, one of their officers, James Moss, wanted to get ahead in the Army, and it's a time of relative peace. There's no further Indian wars going on in the area, so he puts together what's known as the Bicycle Corps.
The Bicycle Corps.
About 25 to 30 guys who are use Spalding bicycles, and Moss has the idea we can eliminate a lot of the need for the horse if we use these things. So he takes his men on extended trips to the Mission Valley, Yellowstone National Park, and then he makes a big one all the way from Missoula to St. Louis, Missouri in 1897.
On bicycle.
It's covered in all national media, St. Louis papers. Missoulian sends a correspondent along, and it's considered quite a feat that he moves 30 men by Missoula all the way through bicycle in an era when the roads really aren't that good, and he has to spend a lot of his time riding on the railroad right-of-way to get there.
That had to have been a little bit bumpy going over all the ties.
Yeah. Well, these were tough guys. So the experiment works, but at the same the internal combustion engines coming along pretty fast, and that kind of overwhelms the need for the bicycle in the U.S. Army.
But you know, I've also seen. I went to a bicycle museum in Pennsylvania. That's an unbelievable museum. Just a little plug for them. But they had paratrooper bicycles that would fold up, and the paratroopers would jump out with their bicycles and then be able to cruise around. So they're still using bicycles.
Those are probably British. And
I think they were American.
Was it? Okay.
I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that there were bicycles that were going with the paratroopers, U.S. military. We'd have to look that up, I guess.
Yeah,
Google might have something.
I'm familiar with Operation Market Garden, Battle of Arnhem, 1944. The British British Airborne Forces tended to bring them along a lot. So,
okay, so I could be 100% wrong. I knew that they were painted military green, and they said that they were used as paratrooper
Could be
bikes.
a U.S. experiment. I can't verify I've ever seen any pictures of any which were taken over to Europe or anywhere else by American Airborne Forces, but could be it was an experiment that got going for a while. So,
well, that's really interesting, and he's got a picture up here of this bicycle corps. It looks like they're at Mammoth Hot Springs in Yellowstone Park.
That's correct.
And the Buffalo Soldiers, they're all holding onto their bikes, all decked out with packs on the front, in front of the handlebars, and it looks like packs hanging down from the center bar. And there's about 8 guys standing in different levels there at the Mammoth Hot Springs. It's a pretty cool picture. And then you've got a picture over here of a plane that looks a lot like the Wright brothers' plane landing on a ship. Did they have aircraft carriers back in World War I?
This was the first attempt to fly an aircraft off of a U.S. Navy ship. In 1910, Eugene Ely, this is he used what's called a Curtiss pusher.
Okay.
He manages to fly off the U.S. Earlier, he was able to fly off the USS Birmingham, and in 1911, he manages to make a landing on the converted battleship USS Pennsylvania.
Wow!
So, using this homemade flight deck, but that's the beginning of U.S. naval aviation, 1910, 1911.
Yeah, and Wright brothers flew in 1903, so this would have been very early.
Relatively.
And Curtiss was kind of the main competitor with the Wright Corporation that was creating planes at the time.
Correct.
In fact, I was at a museum, and they said that Curtiss had to pay patent rights on every plane that they made to the Wright brothers because they had the patent on the airplane, which was just kind of mind-boggling too.
Ka-ching, ka-ching, yes. But the local connection is in June 1911, Eugene Ely comes to Missoula, brings in one of his Curtiss pushers by train, and the Army agrees to do a demonstration here at Fort Missoula of his plane. And they clear a landing field for him in front of Officers Row here at the fort. And Curtiss Ely brings his plane in and spends June 28th taking off and landing from the Fort Missoula parade ground.
Well, that's cool.
That's a model of the type he used.
And that's kind of a tri-wing plane.
That's right.
And when he says it's a pusher, that means that the prop is behind the cockpit instead of in front.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
And so that was the beginnings of aviation in western Montana when Eugene Ely brought his plane. So covering the Spanish-American War, right here, Montana sends, for the first time, sends an organized unit to fight with U.S. forces in the Spanish-American War, Montana Militia Unit. They get all the way to Georgia. They're not needed, but they get to Georgia at the height of the malaria season. A lot of them get sick before they get back to Missoula.
Uh-oh.
So,
and in this display, you've got a set of riding boots with a chain coming across the top of them, kind of ornamental.
Yeah.
You've got a McClellan saddle. You've got a couple of uniforms again, a set of saddlebags.
1890s period.
Right. Very nice.
So
You got another McClellan saddle over here and a pack saddle.
Yeah, we talk about these. Western Montana is big packing country due to people taking horse and mule trains into the wilderness area.
Right.
And also the Forest Service uses them a lot for maintenance in the back country. So we talk about the development of horse and mule packing in Western Montana here and its military applications, which were taken after the frontier period into the imperial age right here.
Okay.
So, and we're covering, continuing the imperial age, we're covering the Philippine insurrection. We've got some native built, which is the postscript to the Spanish-American War. The Philippine insurrection took longer than the Spanish-American War did. A lot of American action, a lot of fatalities into the Philippines from 1900 to 1904.
Really?
So,
and we were sending troops over to the Philippines at that, because I know that we were occupying the Philippines during World War II.
Yes.
And then we lost it during World War II, and then we regained it, correct?
Yeah, this was the preliminary. The Philippines were the Army's main preoccupation during the first years of Teddy Roosevelt's administration right here. We've got some homemade Philippine insurgent weapons right here.
This is really cool. Because he's got a homemade rifle, a homemade pistol, a spear, and a sword, along with a couple of helmets, and also some marksmanship awards from 1900 that are little round medallions. Mm-hmm. I guess I don't know much at all about that Philippine
Philippine insurrection
conflict,
on the sign there, 1898, 1902. Yeah,
that's interesting.
It was kind of a preview of Vietnam. It was a very difficult tropical campaign, and there were lots and lots of fatalities.
Who were we fighting?
The Filipinos.
Oh.
They said, thank you very much for making the Spanish go away, and we'll take things from here. And we said, no, we're going to stick around for a bit. So there was a lot of atrocity, a lot of fatalities, a lot of non-combatants getting killed. It's over by 1902, but after the Iron Fist comes the Velvet Glove, and from 1902 up to World War II, the U.S. Plows a lot of money into Philippine internal improvements and building infrastructure and so forth. So it's a mixed bag if you look at it. But
and buying shoes for Imelda.
Oh, yeah, that came later,
right?
So. And then we get into the Boxer Rebellion, 1900s. U.S. forces deployed to China to relieve the siege of the diplomatic legations in China during 1900. If you ever want to slog through the Charlton Heston movie, 55 Days at Peking, that documents it pretty well, as Charlton Heston best can, of course.
Right.
And so... We've got things from this period here, and also...
I didn't realize we were in China then either.
Oh, yes. There was a big diplomatic section in China at the time. At the time, the Western powers were forcing what was known as the open door policy on China. No restriction on trade, and we're going to come in and set up our own foreign areas, not subject to your laws, and basically it's a way of exerting informal empire. Right. So these diplomatic legations are big. They have thousands of troops in them, are designed to accommodate thousands of troops, and we're very strict. They say, you can't enforce Chinese law on Western nationals, and so this irritates the Chinese, of course, and what are known as the Society of Righteous Fists, the Chinese boxers, we call them the boxers in Western parlance, revolt in 1900 and attack the Western interests in Peking, and the Western countries, U.S., Austria, Britain, France, Germany, Italy, Japanese, put together a relief force of 19,000 to march to Peking and put down the Boxer Rebellion. And so that's about several months of difficult fighting to get to Peking and finally put down the Boxers. And the Boxers eventually lose a lot of tacit Chinese support, and the revolt dissipates. But that's a source of some consternation among the present Chinese government. This all happens. It's a very deeply ingrained historical memory. But this case right here, yelp. please assure your listeners that's a museum dog. She's not being mistreated. She just wants to come out and participate in the interview.
She's a very fun-loving dog. The
Indeed.
dog's got a tail that wags like crazy.
Yes, indeed.
And just because of the piece of what we're doing, she's put in the office, horribly mistreated.
Oh, yes.
Having to stay in a plush office in a chair while we do our podcast.
Yes, indeed. We'll probably have the ASPCA down on us tomorrow.
There you go.
All right. Well, and so we have more U.S. Army period items from the Boxer Rebellion and the Mexican Punitive Expedition here. Just to wrap up, the Mexican Punitive Expedition was the chasing of Pancho Villa in Mexico before World War I. Montana sent a cavalry unit to that as well. Yeah, 1916, 1917. And it's also the expedition where George S. Patton made his reputation as a soldier who really liked to mix it up. More U.S. Army items. The most interesting probably is recently acquired the Merriam Pack right here, devised by a Civil War veteran who went on to design a number of Western military army posts, General Henry C. Merriam. So he decided the Army needed a new pack. He put this design together. It came with 2 wooden slats holding it up, which you buckled into holders in the back of your belt. So that's how you carried the bag.
Oh, so your hips helped carry it.
Supposedly, soldiers didn't like it. They called it the murdering pack. But he got some government contracts, and in 1898, several thousand were produced, and a lot of militia units bought them. This one was bought by the New York 65th Volunteers right here.
Okay. So. Wow. And now you said you have several buildings outside.
Well, we've got one of the fort's 2 original buildings, the 1878 powder magazine, stone limestone powder magazine. We run that too. And we've got a smaller building, also a CCC building, which we tell the story. We have a Civil War gallery, and we have a gallery on the CCC in the 1930s and that.
Okay. Well, let's not worry about going and checking that out on this podcast.
Only so many hours in the day.
That's pretty much it. And this has been absolutely fantastic. I so appreciate your time, Tate.
Well, thank you for visiting.
The information that I've learned today is just is unbelievable. I'm going to have to listen to this one 2 or 3 times just to keep myself up on things. I like to. Do you guys have a website?
FortMissoula.org.
FortMissoula.org. Do you have a Facebook page?
We do daily updates on our Facebook page.
Daily updates?
You can get to our Facebook page right off FortMissoula.org.
Okay. And so, wow, that's pretty good that you have daily updates. And that's history updates or just...
museum, history, and just everything that happens around here. We try to keep our visitorship and members informed of.
Well, that's cool.
If you go on there right now, we put an interesting story. We had to exfiltrate a barn owl from our small building the other day that got trapped inside. So we called in specialized help from a lady who runs an organization called Raptors of the Rockies, who works with eagles and hawks and all these kind of critters all the time, and she helped us get it out of the building and on its way to further adventures.
Cool.
So,
yeah, well, I'll have to check that out also. Sure. And I like to finish out my podcast by saying the world is full of wonder. People need to get out and explore. This museum here in Missoula is so packed full of stuff. It'll take you a while to explore all the displays and to see everything. And everybody have an absolutely wonderful day. 2975
General Foster Avenue, Missoula. Open 7 days a week in the summertime and weekends in the fall and spring.
Okay, that sounds good. And like I said, it's a nice museum. It's well worth the visit if you're coming through Missoula and you have any interest at all in any military history. Sure. Thanks a lot, Tate.
Well, thank you again. And come see us again when you
We
can.
will do that.
All the roll and go, where am I to go? Meet Johnny, where am I to go? For I'm a young and a sailor lad, and where am I to go?